Have you ever felt like someone else's success cast a shadow over your own progress? Have you ever compared yourself to others and wondered if you're doing enough, achieving enough, or even worthy enough? What if I told you that real success doesn't need to be measured by envy or comparison, but by the peace and purpose you build within yourself? Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because here we focus on becoming stronger, wiser, and unstoppable from the inside out.
1. Redefining success. Success is often painted as wealth, status, or recognition. Society frequently tells us that to be successful is to have more money, more influence, more accolades. From childhood, we are fed images of luxury, stories of extraordinary achievement, and the idea that unless we rise above others, we are somehow less. But the truth is, success is deeply personal. It is not a single universal standard that can be measured by trophies or bank accounts. It's not about how others see you, but about how aligned you are with your own values. If your definition of success is borrowed from someone else's expectations, you will always feel behind, chasing a finish line that moves whenever you approach it. Imagine a person who earns vast wealth yet feels empty because they never pursued what they loved. Now picture another who lives modestly but wakes each day with purpose, contributing to something they believe in. Which one is truly successful? The answer depends not on external markers, but on the inner state of alignment between one's actions and values. Stoic philosophy teaches that externals, wealth, fame, beauty, are not within our control and thus cannot be the true measure of a good life. Success, then, must be redefined as living in accordance with virtue, with reason, with one's chosen principles. Anything else is borrowed ambition. Take a moment to ask yourself, what do I truly want? What would make my life feel fulfilling even if no one clapped for me? These are not easy questions, because answering them may reveal how much of your current path was chosen for appearances or approval. Many live lives scripted by family, culture, or comparison, only to discover years later that they were climbing a ladder leaning against the wrong wall. Redefining success requires honesty, courage, and often the humility to begin again. But the reward is profound, a life that feels authentically yours. When you start to define success on your own terms, envy begins to lose its grip. You no longer look to the left and right to see who is ahead or behind, because your journey is no longer a race. It becomes a path only you can walk. Envy thrives on comparison, but when your measure is inward, comparison loses its meaning. You may celebrate others without feeling diminished, for their success does not threaten yours. In this way, redefining success liberates you. It allows you to pursue a life of depth rather than display, of substance rather than shadow. 2. Building without competing. Many people chase growth by trying to outshine others, but competition for validation is a trap. The constant drive to prove yourself against someone else sets you on unstable ground, for your sense of worth rises and falls with external approval. It forces you to measure your progress by standards that are not your own, by trophies and titles that may mean little to your soul. And that approval, no matter how bright in the moment, can vanish in an instant. To build with the aim of surpassing others is to live in constant comparison, a cycle that robs you of both joy and peace. This does not mean that competition itself is always bad. Healthy rivalry can sharpen skills, just as iron sharpens iron. But when your identity, Your peace of mind and your sense of worth depend on whether you are ahead or behind someone else. You have ceded control of your life. You have built your house on shifting sand. The Stoics remind us that the only true good lies in our own actions and intentions, not in the fleeting opinions of others. Competing for validation is therefore a form of slavery. It binds you to an audience whose judgment is unstable and often shallow. Instead, build because it matters to you. Build because it reflects who you are becoming, not because you need to prove yourself to anyone else. The shift is subtle but transformative. When your energy is directed inward, toward excellence, toward integrity, toward mastery, your work becomes an expression of your growth rather than a scoreboard. The process itself becomes meaningful, independent of how it compares to others. This is why many of history's greatest thinkers, artists, and builders pursued their craft in solitude, motivated not by applause, but by an inner compulsion to create. When your drive comes from within, success becomes sustainable. You are no longer tethered to the fragile approval of the crowd, nor shaken when others advance faster or shine brighter. Instead, your success is measured by your fidelity to your own principles and the quality of your effort. You stop asking, "Am I better than them?" and start asking, "Am I better than I was yesterday?" In this way, life becomes less about conquest and more about cultivation, not a race to outpace others, but a steady path toward becoming the fullest version of yourself.
3. Focusing on the work, not the applause. The loudest distractions in life are applause and recognition. They feel good in the moment, like a warm fire on a cold night, but they fade quickly, leaving you searching for the next spark. If you build only for praise, you'll find yourself addicted to the approval of others, chasing likes, titles, or fleeting compliments rather than lasting progress. The danger is subtle but real. The more you crave applause, the less you are able to endure the quiet, necessary grind of real growth. Greatness comes from focusing on the craft, not the claps. True mastery is developed in silence, in the hours no one sees, in the repetition and discipline that rarely earns applause. A musician does not become great by playing only in front of cheering audiences, but by practicing scales in solitude. A philosopher is not formed by applause, but by wrestling with hard questions in private. A builder does not become skilled by receiving praise, but by learning from failure and starting again. The Stoics remind us that virtue itself is often unobserved. It is the unseen choices of honesty, patience, and diligence that shape character, not the dramatic gestures that others notice. When you give your best to the process itself, the results will eventually speak louder than any applause ever could. Applause is temporary, but excellence is lasting. By shifting focus from outcome to effort, from recognition to integrity, you gain freedom. You are free to fail without despair, for the work itself was worthwhile. You are free to succeed without arrogance, for the applause is no longer your goal. In this way, your energy is directed where it matters most, into the daily labor of becoming skilled, disciplined, and true to your calling. This does not mean that recognition is inherently bad. It can be a byproduct of excellence, a signal that your work has touched others. But when applause is pursued for its own sake, it corrupts both the work and the worker. The antidote is humility, the willingness to labor quietly, to build diligently, and to trust that the value of your work lies not in who notices, but in what it becomes. Applause may come or it may not. What matters is that your craft, your growth, and your virtue remain intact. In this lies the freedom to work with clarity, courage, and peace.
4. Growing while keeping inner peace. Growth is important, but not if it costs you your peace.
What's the point of achieving milestones if you're constantly restless, jealous, or bitter? Success without peace is just stress with a trophy. Too often, people sprint toward accomplishments with the idea that once they reach them, they'll finally feel whole. But what happens when the applause fades? What happens when you're left alone in silence, realizing that you traded tranquility for recognition? Growth that erodes inner harmony isn't real growth. It's merely a desperate chase for validation. True success is not about stacking achievements while your heart grows emptier. It's about expanding your capabilities while keeping your soul intact. True power is balancing ambition with serenity. It's being able to chase improvement while staying grounded, calm, and centered. This doesn't mean you stop striving for better. It means you learn how to strive without destroying your well-being. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, yet remaining untouched because your roots are deep. That's the power of inner peace. You can move forward, you can improve, you can expand, but you never let the winds of comparison or the noise of expectation pull you away from yourself. When you stop letting external chaos dictate your internal state, you'll realize that peace is not the absence of growth, it's the very foundation of it. Peace makes growth sustainable, steady, and meaningful. Think about it. What good is financial success if you can't sleep at night? What good is professional recognition if your spirit feels restless? What good is achieving more if you constantly feel like it's never enough? These are the questions that reveal the trap of unbalanced ambition. Real growth should add peace, not subtract it. The moment you notice that your success is costing you joy, relationships, or clarity of mind, that's the moment to pause and reevaluate. Inner peace is not negotiable. Without it, even your proudest victories will taste hollow. Growth and peace must walk together, because if you lose one to gain the other, you've lost both. Living with this balance requires discipline, because the world will constantly tell you to choose one over the other. Society often glorifies burnout, comparing struggles, and restless striving as if they are badges of honor. But peace doesn't mean laziness, and ambition doesn't have to mean stress. To grow with peace means setting boundaries, learning to rest without guilt, and moving at a pace that doesn't break your spirit. It means realizing that your worth is not tied to how quickly you advance, but to how deeply you live. When ambition and serenity coexist, life becomes more than a race. It becomes a fulfilling journey. Therefore, let growth be measured not just by what you achieve, but by what you keep intact while achieving it. If you can move forward without losing yourself, if you can strive without becoming restless, if you can grow while keeping calm, then you've found a path far richer than mere success. That is the kind of growth that doesn't leave scars, but instead builds character. It's the growth that strengthens you without shattering you. It's the growth that proves peace isn't a prize at the end of the race. It's the ground you run on every step of the way.
5. Becoming living proof. People are inspired not by envy-driven success, but by those who achieve quietly, steadily, and authentically. The loudest voices often attract attention for a moment, but they rarely sustain respect. Lasting influence doesn't come from shouting about how much you've accomplished. It comes from embodying the principles that brought you there. You don't need to constantly prove yourself with words. Your results, your peace, and your presence will speak for themselves. In fact, the most powerful people are often those who remain composed and humble, letting their lives become a living example instead of a performance. True proof doesn't need an announcement. It radiates naturally. By becoming living proof that it can be done,
without jealousy, without competition, and without losing yourself, you give others permission to believe in their own path. In a world where comparison is the default, someone who chooses contentment over envy stands out. Someone who advances without stepping on others becomes a quiet revolution. Your life then serves as evidence that success doesn't require constant rivalry or betrayal of values. You show that it's possible to grow without bitterness, to succeed without arrogance, and to win without creating enemies. That example becomes more valuable than any motivational speech because it is seen, not just heard. Think of it this way. Anyone can talk about peace, but not everyone can embody it while pursuing growth. Anyone can tell others to be authentic, but not everyone has the courage to live authentically under pressure. To become living proof means aligning your actions with your values so consistently that others notice without you needing to explain. It means being so rooted in calm strength that people feel inspired just by your presence. The impact of such authenticity cannot be measured in numbers, but in the quiet ways it encourages others to trust their own journey instead of being consumed by comparison. This is the essence of legacy, not in titles, not in trophies, but in the lives you touch by your example. When people see you thriving with balance, they're reminded that they can too. When they witness your peace in a world of noise, they begin to believe that stillness is possible even in their own chaos. When they notice that you succeed without shouting, they learn that dignity speaks louder than pride. Your life becomes a mirror that reflects possibility back to others, helping them see that they don't need to sacrifice themselves for growth. That is the quiet gift of becoming living proof. So let your life do the teaching. Let your consistency be the message. Let your peace be the evidence. The most powerful influence doesn't come from convincing others, but from showing them. Be the proof that growth without jealousy is possible. Be the proof that success without bitterness is real. Be the proof that peace is not a weakness, but the deepest form of strength. In the end, you don't just build a personal victory, you build a model for others to follow. And that is success in its highest, most meaningful form.
So remember this, your journey doesn't need to be fueled by envy. Define your own success, build for yourself, focus on the work, protect your peace, and become proof that it's possible. That's the kind of success that lasts. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs it. Your success story is unfolding. Make sure it's written in your own voice, not in someone else's shadow.